Welcome, everyone. I'm Kevin Carpenter, volunteer at CppCon. And this morning, I think I said this morning the last time we did this because you're East Coast, I'm West Coast, so morning works. Patrice Roy, how you doing this morning, Patrice?
I'm doing fine. There's a heat wave where I am, and I removed the ventilator sounds just to talk to you because I like you, Kevin.
Well, I appreciate that. I do have to ask, though, what is your definition of heat wave is around what temperature?
Well, my region, I'm close to Montreal, so there's a lot of water where I am, and the humidity factor plays a big role. So
Oh, yes,
yesterday,
it does.
we were at 41. It's
Yeah.
41 Celsius.
Yes, and when you take 41 plus the humidity, that is
It was absurd, yeah. So
Yeah.
my fridge broke and my AC broke the same week. It's a tough week.
Yeah, here in Arizona, we start off with a very dry, we do have that dry heat, but then we have the summer monsoons. And once that hits, our humidity is at 50, 60% as well. And it's just, yes.
Yeah.
So, Patrice, we're going to talk today about your class, Thinking Small. But for people that don't know you, like I've gotten to know you, let's tell them a bit about you.
Okay, well, I've been doing C++ for a long while now, for over 30 years. I've been teaching for 24 years now, just a bit crazy. I have a number of cats and a number of children, so that's what I do. I work with programmers mostly. My main clientele, I'd say, I teach at various levels of graduate and undergrads, and my main, I'd say, professional clientele is game programmers. So this influences the way I teach and the examples I use in my class.
Absolutely, I can see that. And so that brings us to your class, Thinking Small.
Yeah.
I think of, I play with Arduinos, and so it's a microcontroller. Growing up, when I was in high school, our electronics, you actually built a wire wrapped, Z80 tied to a keyboard. So back then it was, very, very small. But how does that kind of relate in what you teach today?
Oh, that's amusing. Okay, so I'm not presuming that anyone will have special hardware coming in. You can have just laptops. I'm only using standard C++ stuff. That's the goal. And I'm only trying to write portable code with people so that if they use whatever compiler they like, it's going to work still. So the idea of that class came, we were discussing my PhD offline earlier, came because when I was writing my own stuff for my PhD, I ended up writing some kind of virtual machine with multi-threading agents and stuff in C++. It was under 2 megabytes overall. Whereas if you write a hello world in some other popular languages, you start with 9 megabytes and go up. It gives you insane control over those things, and you can actually benefit from that if you're writing all sorts of interesting stuff, including embedded systems, of course. And in games, my people, they tend to try to get every little bit of memory they can because they want to push more goodies in there, see? So They like control. So we look from different angles as to ways to make your code and your data smaller and more efficient, and your programs run faster along the way. Yeah.
That sounds excellent. With the programming that you're doing with that, is there a lot of, when you're doing representation, what kind of tools do you use to measure the size? Is it strictly more on the binary, or is it about the memory usage as well?
Yeah, well, there's many angles to that. So we use the language itself, of course, things like size of and align of, because we play with size and alignment. We do introduce tools from time to time. I try to use the online stuff if I can, because it's pretty cool. People can use it at home. So I don't have the names close by, but yeah, we take a number of weird measurements, but we do take measurements in terms of speed and size as we go along all the time. So we compare different representations and see what gives the best results under this angle, that angle, and try to make things fit. We look at some small things as when you move data around from this location to this location in your object, what kind of impact does it have? And my mindset with that is that I get a lot of experienced programmers in my classes, mostly in the evening classes. They come from Java background, C# background. They're surprised that you can look at code from that angle, and that switching the location of a variable can have such a big impact on your code and the size it occupies. So there's an enlightenment that comes along with this. So yeah, it's kind of fun.
So when we were talking earlier too, because I was reading like one of the parts where you're working to get things onto certain cache lines and stuff, and of course, when we talked before in 2020 or 2020, in 2020, you were doing managing memory, which I know you had that class set for this year too, but you're just going to focus on thinking small. But it seems to me like there'd be some overlap between those two. I mean, if someone was looking at managing memory, would they still, find value, you think, with?
I think so. Last year I was kind of scared because I gave both classes and some people were in both of them, like at least 3 of them. I do think we should ask them, of course, but I do think they had fun still because there's communal interests in both, let's put it this way. And they're like kind of 2 angles of attack on the same issue of performance and getting the most out of your hardware, we could put it this way. So I think people who would have liked to go to managing memory this year or were thinking about it, they could actually benefit from that because they will get kind of the same results from it, but from a different perspective. Yeah.
Yeah, kind of a different point of view. That's.
Yeah.
I was, I'm thinking about it because I was going back through looking at talks that you've done, trying to see, bits and pieces of things because there's some parts where like, when I speak with Klaus, some of Klaus's things that he has in his class actually show up in his talks. If you watch not near the depth, and to be able to sit in a class with Klaus, and actually have him help you out with code is a great thing. I think that's the thing with all the Academy classes.
It's so much more fun with us too, or for us being in the room with people, passing by and saying, "Oh, there's a comma missing," or something like that. Is pretty fun. The ambience is not the same thing. It's much more pleasant and human that way. Yeah.
Yeah. I've enjoyed being, I spent a lot of time working from home before COVID, and then I was back in an office, and I've really liked being there with my team, having everyone around. And it's funny now because our company has moved to where everybody is a work from home. It's by choice, and they don't see that changing. At the same time, as much as I would like to go back to the office, nobody wants to be that person that gets the whole team pulled back because they really want to be back in the office. Yeah. But I just, I kind of laugh about it because are you glad to be back to teaching? I mean, I remember in 2020, it was all done online and everybody made it work. But, to that point, it's like, it's glad to be back.
We can make it work. We know we proved it. The tools work. So we know that. But really, the on-site experience for a class is really not the same thing. The pleasure that people get from the jokes, the winks, the changes in tone, the way you move, that you cannot do when you're online. You have to stay calm. If I raise my voice very strongly, people with headphones will say, "What's going on?" When I'm in a classroom, if I slap a table or something or do crazy things, it just works. The magic is there. So it's much more better. Much better that way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Me too.
So, talks wise, you actually have a talk you're doing this year too, right? Reviewing beginner's code.
Yeah. And that's the teacher in me speaking again. I'm tired of students coming to me and saying, "I never get any feedback from anyone on my code. I never got any until I got to your class, and you're actually reading my code and writing stuff on paper and telling me what's good and what's less good and what to think about." We should all do that. And this applies to teaching. It applies to mentoring. This applies to code reviews. It's very important. So there's many layers to giving feedback on code. I'm going to focus on when you give feedback to beginners, like relative beginners, of course. So someone beginning his career or her career, or someone who's actually going through the learning process of being in school and learning teaching. So what do you focus on? How do you provide it? It's been a very different experience for me during COVID because I had to do everything by writing. It took forever, man, because because you don't know how the person's feeling when you're giving back your written feedback. It could be hurtful because the person could be depressed or self-conscious or something.
Right.
When you're in person, you can read the thing better, so it's a different experience. So I really hope it's going to be a good talk, because I think it's a very important topic.
Yeah, I have two thoughts about the talk. One is, to your point of giving good feedback. I definitely, there's a couple senior developers on our team, and one of them came from that really strict, regimented. Whenever they did a push, everything was always code reviewed, best practices, and so when we first started working together, I try not to have, as they say, the programmer's ego, but there's a part when someone's looking at your code, and especially if it's something that, I'll joke, templates. When I was reading about your class, it says you'll use templates, which I want to ask about, but it's interesting though, if you can get someone to help you with that good feedback, whatever the level variances are, because, I've been programming for a long time, but when he would look at anything I did in templates, it was, did you think of this? Did you think of that? And it took me a little bit to just look at the value of that feedback of becoming a better programmer, versus having, and so I think that point of where you're like, there's multiple levels of what you can do when it comes to giving feedback, but to be able to look at it, especially with your experience as a teacher, and come up with those. So that'd still be a good talk for someone that isn't even necessarily, it would seem to me like you could gain a lot from that talk, even looking at common mistakes and how they're, even if it's not from a review perspective. True?
Yeah. But I don't want, on my website, I have a museum of horror somewhere where I put things that are weird and suggestions to make them better, but I don't put
Okay, yeah.
But that's not where the talk is going to be headed. I'm more looking as to how you provide feedback that's useful without killing yourself working, because it can take a lot of time. It can be draining. So there are tricks to make it efficiently too. And I'm planning, hoping, because it's only an hour, to be able to address the receiving feedback side of things, because as you said, sometimes it's difficult to do. Now, when I'm writing articles or course notes or something, I make sure other people read them. There's always mistakes. Even on things that have lived for 20 years, there's always stuff that doesn't work, or stuff that we've skipped over or something. And it's not a humiliation. So learning process is important. And it's difficult indeed, as you said, to receive that at first, but it's important.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping I'm going to be able to convey those two sides of things. And I'm hoping this talk is going to be useful to my colleagues in general.
Yeah. Excellent. So I'd said there that I wanted to hit you back up about templates. I am curious, when you're doing the thinking small, not to jump back to the class, but as a last question, how is it that templates really, can you give me an idea how templates play an important part in getting the code small? Is it because,
That's interesting. So, when you're writing, let's say you're writing a template class,
mm-hmm.
and you have member functions in there that you don't use.
Okay.
Well, they're not generated. They won't be in your binary. If you're writing an entire class, normally that's a concrete class. You might have a different effect. Now, with templates, there's another thing. There's specialization. So sometimes you can have specializations of classes for some types, where you can make sure that you generate less code than you would have written in the first place if you had written them by hand, because you can make them converge to something that's common and reduce some classes something very small. You can sometimes make some examples disappear because there are given combinations of integer and type parameters to your templates. There are some functions you can resolve at compile time sometimes and make them go away and stuff. So there's a number of interesting things you can do with templates to make your code actually smaller. Some tricks I picked from other people. There's one that I use in my class that I took from David Van der Voort's book with, I think it's Nikolai Josetis, where they do this cool specialization of a container with pointers and make them converge to the void star type with casts. And you look at the generated binaries with Godbolt or something, it makes a significant impact, and there's no speed impact. So it's pretty cool. So Godbolt is awesome for that, to be honest. So we're gonna, there's a number of things you would like. Come to my class.
I may actually do that. Yeah, it's always funny as a volunteer. I'm there for the first weekend, but that Saturday is about the only open day because by the time Sunday hits, we are, it's game on getting everything ready for everyone coming back. And I am excited to say, at least based on our numbers, we definitely have more returning this year than last year. So I think it's going to be a great conference on site. Um, I look forward to seeing you there. Either way, I know I'll look forward to seeing you. And I appreciate your time this morning, Patrice. So thank you very much.
You're a very nice man. Thank you for doing this. You're awesome.
My pleasure. We'll talk to you more soon, Patrice.
Cheers.
Cheers.